In the ruins of an ancient city in Turkey, archaeologists found the skeleton of a young girl, left unburied in the street. Her bones were scorched. Around her lay charred timbers, fallen walls, and a layer of ash up to a meter thick. Bronze arrowheads were embedded in the walls. Piles of sling stones sat stacked where defenders had stockpiled them against a coming attack. Someone besieged this city, burned it, and left its dead lying in the streets, and it happened around 1180 BC. Ancient Greek scholars, counting back through their own histories, dated the fall of Troy to almost exactly the same decade. Because this mound, called Hisarlik, is Troy, the city Homer says fell to a wooden horse after 10 long years of siege. For centuries, scholars dismissed the Trojan War as pure poetry, a myth of gods and heroes, with no more history than Atlantis. But the ash is real. The arrowheads are real. The girl was real. And so the question becomes uncomfortably specific. Did the most famous war in human storytelling actually happen? The evidence comes in 3 forms: ruins, clay tablets, and 1 poem. To read that evidence, you first have to meet the man who found Troy, and very nearly destroyed it in the process. In 1873, a wealthy German businessman named Heinrich Schliemann announced the discovery every serious classicist had declared flatly impossible. Digging at Hisarlik, he unearthed gold diadems, jewelry, and bronze weapons, and named the hoard Priam's treasure, after Troy's legendary king. The find made Troy world-famous overnight. But Schliemann had a problem. One he did not yet understand was a problem. Hisarlik is not one city. It is 9 major settlements stacked on top of each other, spanning more than 3,000 years. Schliemann's gold came from the layer called Troy II, a city that thrived around 2400 to 2200 BC. That is roughly 1,000 years before the Trojan War could have happened. He found real treasure in the wrong millennium. Worse, to reach that gold, he had blasted a trench 17 meters deep, straight down through every single layer above it. His workers shoveled through the late Bronze Age city, the one that matched Homer's dates, and discarded it as worthless fill. Schliemann proved that Troy existed, and destroyed much of the evidence for the war he was looking for, in the same swing. So which of the 9 stacked cities was Homer's Troy? Answering that question took another century of far more careful digging. Later archaeologists numbered the layers Troy 1 at the bottom to Troy 9 at the top, and 2 candidates stood out. Troy 6 was magnificent, great sloping walls and large buildings, a citadel fit for the wealthy kingdom Homer describes. But when Troy 6 fell, around 1300 BC, the ruins told a strange story. Walls had collapsed, yet nothing burned. The pattern matched an earthquake, not an army. Toppled masonry, no arrowheads, no bodies. Cities sacked by soldiers look different. In the 1930s, American archaeologist Carl Blegen dug into the layer directly above, where the survivors had rebuilt, Troy VIIa. Its houses were built directly on the earthquake ruins, and this rebuilt city did not fall to nature this time. Blegen found the meter of ash, the scorched skeletons, the arrowheads in the walls, the stockpiled slingstones. This was warfare. The destruction of Troy VIIa dates to around 1190 to 1180 BC, squarely inside the traditional window for the war. Skeptics still had one strong objection. This Troy seemed tiny, a fortress for a king, not a city worth 10 years. Then, in the 1990s, a German team pointed new technology at the fields below the citadel, and the picture changed completely. Manfred Korfmann's team scanned the ground with magnetometers, instruments that detect buried walls without moving a single shovel of earth. Beneath the farmland, they found an entire lower city, invisible for 3,000 years, spreading out below the famous citadel. With it, Troy covered roughly 200,000 square meters, defended by a wide ditch cut to stop chariots, backed by a palisade. And that lower city was destroyed at the same moment as Troy VIIa. The whole settlement burned together, citadel and town. Not every scholar accepts Korfmann's picture, and the academic fight over it was fierce. But Troy now looked big enough to matter. Big enough, in fact, to appear in the files of the greatest power of that world, the mighty Hittite Empire. In the ruins of the Hittite capital, thousands of clay tablets survived, and several mention a troublesome western city called Wilusa. Linguists notice that Wilusa matches Ilios, Homer's own name for Troy, and another Hittite place named Taroissa matches Troia. The tablets also describe a sea power called Ahiawa, kings the Hittites treated as equals. Most scholars read that as Mycenaean Greece, which means Evereus isn't Rhines's war, which means both sides of Homer's war were real nations, and one tablet holds a name that should not be there. Around 1280 BC, the Hittite king Muwatalli II signed a formal treaty with the ruler of the city of Wilusa. The ruler's name was Alaksandu. Say it slowly. Homer's Iliad gives Paris of Troy a second name, Alexandros. A ruler of Troy, in the right century, carrying the name of the very prince who supposedly started the whole war. It could be coincidence. But the treaty's divine witnesses include a god called Apollyonis, a name Greeks would know as Apollo. Then there is a letter, from the mid-13th century BC, written by a Hittite king to the king of Ahiawa. It mentions that Wilusa was once a bone of contention between their two powers, a dispute serious enough to pass between kings. The empires of the Aegean and Anatolia really did clash over Troy. The tablets confirm conflict in the right place and era. But here is what the tablets never say: that Greeks besieged Wilusa for 10 years, or that the city was sacked. No wooden horse, no Achilles, no Helen. The documents give us a contested city, not the story we were promised. The story itself has exactly one source, a poem written down roughly 4 centuries after the fire. Can it remember anything real? Homer's Iliad was written down in the 8th century BC, 400 to 500 years after Troy VIIa burned. That gap should have erased every real detail. Yet in the poem, Odysseus straps on a helmet made of boar tusks. Boar tusk helmets were real Bronze Age equipment, slivers of tusk sewn in rows onto a leather cap, made centuries before Homer. Archaeologists have dug up exactly such helmets, matching Homer's description. Oral tradition carried true details across the dark centuries. One caveat: some finds suggest those helmets stayed in use much later, closer to Homer's own lifetime. The evidence cuts both ways. So here is the verdict most scholars now accept, in the words of archaeologist Cline, a historical kernel of truth. Real Mycenaean Greeks really clashed over a real Troy. Probably not one 10-year war, but repeated conflicts, remembered and merged. And Troy VIIa burned as the whole Bronze Age world was collapsing around it, in a cascade of drought, famine, and violence. My Herdmead, Unen project, in the story of Documenter. The unburied girl in the street was not a poem. She died in a real fire, in a real war, around 1180 BC. The war was real enough, and the poets did the rest. Next time, a golden warrior's tomb that rewrote where Greek myth began.